we obviously just had a big announcement from the CDC that changes things for a lot of people feeling maybe more comfortable. Can you kind of tell us in your own words what the announcement today means for, maybe a step forward in this pandemic?
Sure. It's been a gradual progression of recommendations by the CDC about what people can do once they are vaccinated. And the bottom line of it is that the more people see that they have an advantage to be vaccinated, we hope that they will realize how important it is, not only for their health and the health of their family and the health of the community, but really for the convenience of doing things that they want to do to get back to normal. So, for example, what was shown today, that most things now outdoors that we were saying you should wear masks, that if you are fully vaccinated, you really can do so many of the things that people ask questions about. I mean, I have it in front of me right now. You can do things like walking, running, or bicycling. I go out and exercise every day, and I pass people, be it on the C&O Canal or in my neighborhood, and you see them alone without anybody within 100 yards of them wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. And the logical question is, like, the risk of getting infected outdoors is very, very low. If you're vaccinated, the risk is even lower. So the people are asking the logical question: what can I do outdoors right now without a mask now that I'm vaccinated? And what the CDC did today, what Dr. Walensky delineated for us, was that you can do so many of the things that are common sense things. The only thing we'll hold back a little bit on is when you go to a gathering that's an enormous number of people, like a big outdoor stadium where you have thousands and thousands of people. Because even though the risk still is quite low, it gets up there to be a little bit more risky. So all the other things, dining in outdoor restaurants, the big thing that people ask is that, can I at least sit down at a restaurant that's an outdoor, the weather is nice and warm and comfortable? Can we do that? The answer is yes, you can.
Okay, devil's advocate, though, if it's a step in the right direction, but if I'm vaccinated, shouldn't I be able to do more than just be outside without a mask on? I mean, I think a lot of people are wondering when they're going to be able to do more inside.
Yeah, I mean, that's an obvious question. And the answer that Dr. Walensky gave, that I agree with, is that, it's really going to depend on two things: the level of virus dynamics in your community and the relative number of people that are vaccinated, which here again is another reason why it's important for more and more people to get vaccinated, because you go from a very, very low risk, minuscule outside, to when you go inside, you're going to be there in a concentrated place. You don't know about the ventilation. You don't know who's been vaccinated or not. You don't know who's infected or not. So even though the risk does remain low, no doubt about it, it certainly is a bit up from being outside in the situation. So that's the reason why, you remember, we were giving caution about even going to a barber or going to a gym or going to an indoor thing. With or without mask, it was like, be careful. Mm-hmm. The advantage now, what they're saying, is that you can do all those things if you're vaccinated with a mask and really be quite safe. I mean, they go right through them: eating at an indoor restaurant or bar, going into a gym, singing in an indoor chorus. Remember, not too long ago, those were things that we said stay away from. Now what we're saying, with the green safe delineation on that chart, showing that if you're vaccinated, you can do all those things. Not only can you do them, but it's really quite safe to do them. So that takes away a fair amount of the anxiety that somebody would have when they're going into an indoor space, even with a mask, to say, how safe is it in here? Now it's really quite safe.
I want to ask you quickly about the J&J vaccinations and the fact that we're hearing that vaccination levels are dropping off. A lot of people aren't going for their second shots. How big of an impact do you think that's like hold on J&J and then the release, creating questions around it? Did that have an irreparable impact on how many Americans are actually going to end up getting vaccinated at the end of this?
I like the word you use, Megan, because it really explains, my answer. You said irreparable impact. I think initially it did, because whenever people hear about a pause, they understandably go and say, whoa, wait, what's going on here? But when you explain that the level of sensitivity that the CDC and the FDA has towards the issue of safety is exquisite. So rather than say you had a pause, now I'm worried about all vaccinations, you say, wait a minute, the pause was for something that was exceedingly rare. When they went back and looked at all the cases, it's something like 1.9 per million, which is, less chance of getting hit by lightning than that, so it's something that really is rare. But what it would tell us that, remember, they looked at 8 million people who were vaccinated with the J&J. There have been about 141 million people who have received one dose, at least one dose, which means if you subtract out 8 million people, you have about 133 or so million individuals, 133 million individuals who've received the Moderna and the Pfizer. The same exquisitely sensitive surveillance system that picked up those very rare adverse events with J&J was also monitoring the Moderna and the Pfizer, and there have been no red flags that have gone up about that. So when you re-examine it, getting back to your irreparable damage, if you really want to examine it, it should give people more confidence that we take vaccination very seriously, we take safety very seriously, and we haven't found anything else but those very, very rare events. So I would think at the end of the day, people should feel more confident about the safety of vaccines.
Right, because of the small amount it caught. Pivoting to school, a lot of parents, obviously we got camps coming up. A lot of sports are starting up again outside, heading into the school year. Is there any indication from the CDC or from NIH when kids under 16 might be able to get a vaccine?
Yeah, I think we have a pretty good idea. It's starting right now, the studies that are going. So we have a study going that has completed that has shown that children from 12 to 15, the high school age, or right around that high school age, that the vaccine Pfizer was done in a clinical trial, and it was shown to be essentially 100% effective. So by the time we get to the fall term, we're pretty confident that we'll be able to vaccinate kids of the high school age. Right now, we're testing in what's referred to as an age de-escalation study, which means since children are vulnerable, you want to make sure you're absolutely clear and confident on the safety and the efficacy. And as you get younger and younger, the children are more and more vulnerable. And that's why you got to be very safe. So what you do is age de-escalation. That means you now know that 12 to 15 is fine. So you go 12 to 9, see how that goes. 9 to 6, see as that goes. 2 to 6, see as that goes. And then 6 months to 2 years. That's all going to take several months. So the projection is by the time we get to the end of 2021 and the first quarter of 2022, we will likely be able to vaccinate children of any age.
That's interesting because you said in the press conference, it took us 11 months, which was relatively fast to create an adult vaccine that was effective. So you would think as children are more sensitive, it would take longer, but based on the science, you're saying we could have this done even quicker than that.
Well, no, actually, it's a very good point, and I'm glad you brought it up that way.
My confusion, sorry.
We know these vaccines are extremely efficacious in trial and excellent and very effective in the real world. It's more of a safety issue with the children and getting the right dose. So it isn't as if we've got to show that we have a good vaccine. We know we have a good vaccine. We just need to know what is it, the safety issue in the children. Is there anything that's sort of strange or different about kids that make them get more of a possible adverse event? We don't think that's the case at all. But when you're dealing with children, you want to prove it. And that's why it's taking that long. It has nothing to do with the efficacy of the vaccine.
That makes me think of how women have been more susceptible to adverse reactions following the second shot. Women of a certain age. It kind of speaks to that, the vulnerabilities, but you don't know where they're going to pop up, correct?
Absolutely. The two groups that are not included in the initial clinical trial are not included for a good reason. And it goes well beyond COVID-19 vaccines. This is what we do with virtually every vaccine we develop. And the two vulnerable groups, among others, but the two prominent ones are pregnant women and children. And that's why you got to be extra special careful. And the general rule, the dictum of vaccinology is that you better show that it's safe and effective in a normal adult population before you start recommending it for pregnant women and for children because of their increased vulnerability.
On one side, you've got the people who are, I'm vaccinated, I want to do it all. And on the other side, you have people who are fully vaccinated and still really living in fear about, what could happen to them in this pandemic. Would you have any words of guidance? I mean, I know a lot of businesses are sort of grappling with how to get people back to work. Do you have any guidance to, for someone who is vaccinated, is following the protocols, of course, but returning to some normalcy?
Yeah. Again, another really great question. I'm glad you're asking them because this is what I get asked all the time, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. The CDC, when they make their recommendations, they make them carefully and conservatively in the sense of seeming to be not always not going far enough. I mean, whenever you finish with a CDC announcement, they say, well, why didn't you go further than that? Well, they're being very careful because they want to make sure they're absolutely correct. So what I would tell the people who are vaccinated, who still are very fearful of doing things, I would say, listen to the CDC guidelines, because the CDC guidelines err very much on the side of safety. So when the CDC in their recommendations say you can go outside and do this, this, and this, and they have a big green color there that says it's really safe, then do it and don't worry about it. Same thing for when they talk about indoor things with the mask. If it's good, you can be darn sure they thought about it very carefully and it's very safe.
I want to hit this quickly, and then I know we have to wrap up, but speaking to the business question, what do you say to businesses where the majority of the workforce is vaccinated? They want to be back in the office, but then maybe there's a few people who are not. Is there any, month timeline where we could drop our masks and be at work and kind of work more normally? Or is it because you don't want to single out the people who aren't comfortable or for some reason cannot get the vaccine, but you also want to return to normalcy? So
yeah, and that's a good question. It relates really, the parameters that we look at are the level of virus in the community. Right now, we were having about 60,000 new infections per day on a 7-day average. Interestingly, the last couple of days, it's gone down some. I hope that that's a trend, but I don't want to say it is yet.
yeah,
Until
21% or something.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. I hope that that's a true trend. As the level of infections get lower and lower, and as the number of people in the broader community get more and more vaccinated, the risk of anybody getting infected comes down and down and down. So in answer to your question, when are the businesses going to start deciding? When you look out and you see, my goodness, we're having like 6,000 infections a day and 70% of the people are vaccinated, it likely would be very, very clear that people are going to say, okay, come back to work. Even if there are some people who are not vaccinated, the risk of transmission is going to be very, very low. By the way, the number I gave you, I pulled out of a hat. I don't want everybody to say it's 6,000. I don't know what that number is. I don't know.
Okay, understood. Earlier this month, you were quoted as saying once you were fully vaccinated, you still would not dine indoors or go to a large gathering. Wondering if you had a change of heart and when your next Nats game is. Everyone wants to know that.
Well, I haven't had a change of heart, and it doesn't matter because I don't have time to go out to dinner. So I'm a bad case study on that. I don't know. I'd love to go to a Nat game as soon as I possibly can. But, we have been working, the medical team that President Biden has put together, literally, we've been working 24/7 without a minute off. So, I mean, I just love the Nats. I love the park. I love the atmosphere. It makes me relax. I'd love to do it, but I don't see that happening, at least not pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, you deserve a break just like everybody else. Last question. Are you optimistic about the future going into the summer with July 4th coming up, these big holidays? Should we kind of still be more cautious than we are free?
I am, Megan, quite optimistic. As long as we keep getting people vaccinated, every day, if we were up to 3 to 4 million people per day. As the pool of unvaccinated people gets smaller and smaller, you've already grabbed the low-hanging fruit. So it becomes more difficult to get people vaccinated. If we could hang around 2 to 3 million vaccinations per day, every day we'll get closer and closer and closer to where you want to be. So, with that as a given, I really do feel, optimistic, but not overconfident, because when you get overconfident, then you declare victory prematurely and you could turn around and go in the wrong direction. But I feel cautiously optimistic that we are going to get to where we want to be by the summer. President Biden had said by the 4th of July, he'd like to see us really getting back to the good old celebrations that we used to have. I hope we get there. I believe we will.
I'm right there with you. I hope so as well. Thank you so much, Dr. Fauci, for your time. We love having you in DC and can't wait till you actually get to go to that Nats game.
Thank you. It's very good to be with you. Thank you for inviting me.